Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. And today I am finally getting to my Ask Me Anything Q&A in celebration of my 2 years on YouTube. So a little while ago, both on my Instagram and on the community tab, I asked you guys to ask me some questions just to get to know me, whether it's about my favorite books, my writing, my life, my counselor career, anything like that. So I asked those on both of those platforms and I got quite a bit of questions. I also tried to film this twice before, but unfortunately a lot of life issues have come up, things that I wasn't expecting at all. So it's definitely thrown things off quite a bit for me. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about questions relating to my writing, my reading, therapy stuff, and general life questions. So let's get to it. The first question I received is, what are my favorite tropes? So I definitely have a few of them. I love a good chosen one story, especially if it's done in a particular way, but I love when it's played with a little bit. I also like rivals to lovers, not when they're really like nasty enemies where it almost makes it unbelievable that they would fall in love with each other, but more rivals, either that they're misunderstood or they're on opposite ends of the spectrum on something and they realize they relate to each other more than they thought. And I also love found family tropes. The next question is, what are my motivations to keep productive? I'm not sure if this was like a general, like how do you stay productive, but I kind of lumped it in with the writing. And to be honest, the biggest thing that keeps me motivated to keep going with my writing is knowing what my end goal is. And ultimately, my end goal is for people to read my story. I know it would be nice and flashy to have like big publishing deals and to have like thousands to millions of readers reading my novels. And I don't think that's ever going to happen. It would be great, but I'm not going to put myself on that pedestal. But really, like, just for other people to read my writing, that makes it worth it to me. And I really want to get to my end goal because ultimately I want people to feel inspired or heard or understood by my writing the way that books have done that for me. And that feeling I feel like I will have when I get to that point, I'm looking forward to it. Next question is, what's a story you've written that's given you hope? And for this one, I have a very simple answer, and that would be my untitled project that I nicknamed Project Hope. So it is a young adult contemporary novel about a young girl who is struggling with her sexuality, and as a part of that, ends up in a hospital to also deal with some mental health issues that arose from her sexuality concerns. So this is partly based on my own journey. There's elements of the main character with asexuality and pan-romanticism and mental health that all kind of come from my own life, but the story itself is very unique in its own. I wrote a bunch of foster care representation in it because when I was a foster care worker, that was something that I never really knew as a kid, and as a worker on the other end, I've seen so many kids who are in the system and are struggling. And I also worked with a lot of teens, both in foster care and in my counseling career, where they end up in hospitals to deal with mental health, and it can be a very scary and painful and traumatic experience. So all of that kind of wrapped into my YA contemporary, but I labeled it Project Hope because at the end it is a hopeful story. It's one of recovery and understanding identity. And I would, if it was me, I would want that story as a kid because that's what I needed. So I hope that one day if readers get to it, like that will have the same hope that inspired for me. Next question is, what story have I written that's broken my heart? Which complete opposite ends. And I don't want to say too much because the story itself kind of changed, but it was part, like the arc of this part was what me and my co-writer had written together before we decided to split the book up and make every character have their own story. And the particular arc in this book is when one character died. And by this point, when we decided this character needed to die, we had gone through this book so many times and like added layers and layers to this character. Like initially, like when I wrote the first chapter back in like 2009, this character died on the first page, like the first chapter. And then like since then, over like the last years, like we have made this character so lovable that I actually literally cried reading it and like writing those scenes, because like I felt like I connected to this character after so long of this character being in my head. So it's definitely broken my heart. The next question I love, and thank you. I know who sent me this question, and thank you so much for it. It's give you guys some details about a story that I am putting off because I don't think I'm ready. And I do have 2 stories, and I'll give a little bit of details without being too long, but they both I'm putting off for the same reason, which is that I would like to do some extensive research on the topic before I actually sit down and write it, because I know it's going to, especially the second one, is going to take a lot of effort to make sure it makes sense, and it would be realistic if like this was a future of America, like it would make sense for that. So the first story is my Project Dreamland, which is a story about a girl who gets sucked into this dream world and tries to fight her way out of it, while also uncovering the path of where her psychology professor father disappeared to, and she thinks they might be somehow connected. So the reason I'm putting that off is because I do want to research more into dreams and dream psychology and all of that, because it is going to be fantasy. Like there is a whole fantasy world to this element, and there's a magic system, but I want it still to stem from dream psychology, where I have this idea that the girl's father was a professor who taught about this and like started to get too close to something and then disappeared. So that's a story that I would like to write. On the other hand, I have a story that is way more sci-fi dystopian. I wrote a short story for it in college, and it was always something that I wanted to come back to. And initially I wrote it as like a young adult protagonist, where the girl was a teenager and got mixed up in this organization. And the more I sat on it all these years, the more I was like, nope, this is an adult sci-fi dystopian. And I really need to research more of how the government runs, why certain things are in place now, and how and why they might be transformed in the future. And I got to brush up on my neuropsychology because the idea is that my main character has PTSD, and they enter a sort of research study where they were going to be tested a new kind of like brain product to try to lower the PTSD symptoms, but they end up waking up a year later with no recollection of what happened to them, and all seems fine otherwise. So I need to research some brain stuff in order to make sure, again, that conceivably, if the thing that I want to happen to this girl will make sense and could be actually possible in the future. So yeah, so those are the 2 stories that I would love to write one day. I do think I need to be like far away and removed from school and like done with tests, done with all this extra stuff, so that like when I'm done with work, I can come home and just actually focus on this research. But we're going to save that for another day. The next question for writing is, do I have a dream agent? And the short answer is no. I am looking into specific agents. I think everyone kind of has a list of who they want to query to, which is definitely something I'm going to do. But as far as like, do I like absolutely want someone? Nope. Next question is, how often do I write on average? Currently, it's been crazy because of school. Before August/September, I would probably say that I write a couple hours like 3 times a week, and it just kind of goes and fluxes from there. In the winter time, I used to write a lot more. 2020, I wrote a ton because after the initial wave of what happened, I got really creative in June of 2020. So it's definitely been up and down based on what projects I'm working on, who I'm working with, and what I'm doing when I'm writing, if I'm not actually procrastinating. I was also asked, how's my work in progress going and which one am I working on? Which that follow-up question was important. So I am currently, you can kind of say I'm working on my Project Vampire, but to be honest, I've only written a chapter and I've been thinking about it more. I just haven't actually been able to sit down and write. More accurately, I'd probably say I'm working on Prophecy Project again, but not with the book itself. My book is currently with a few readers who I'm hoping to get good feedback from. And I'm actually just working on my query letter and synopsis because ideally I will be querying very soon, which is very exciting. So that's kind of my main focus so that I can get that query ready, submit it, and then work on the rest of the projects that I have. What's my favorite thing about writing? And I think I kind of mentioned this already, but I love sharing my writing. I love being able for people to kind of think through things, to be like connecting with something that I've written, and overall just like sharing what I've done. And I really just like creating worlds and creating these scenarios that would make those things possible. And the last writing related question is, what are my favorite things to write? And I think by this point, you've probably guessed that fantasy is definitely one of my favorites. I have a lot of fantastical ideas that I would like to get out there. I think slowly kind of morphing into that, I am also interested in sci-fi. I have written a sci-fi novella that it still needs editing, but it's out there. I love writing poetry as well. I have written quite a bit, and in April of 2021, I did write a poem every day for Camp Nano. And it's not really recent, but it might seem recently. I do also like writing contemporary fiction, whether it's like a rom-com or a young adult, and kind of like the literary fiction side of adult contemporary too, I would say. Like adult, just contemporary in general, not just rom-coms or romances, but in general, contemporaries. I actually only received 2 book-related questions, so this will be quick. The first one is, what are the best books that I've read so far? Now, I'm not sure if this means in 2021, but I am going to use a cheat code here and say I'm going to be having my favorites list of 2021 coming up probably in the beginning of January. I am going to give myself like the month of December to read because I hadn't really been able to read much while I was at school, but I feel like I'm going to have a few days where I can catch up on a lot of reading. So look out for that video. And if you want some other books, I have a 2019 and a 2020 recap that I will linked probably down below, maybe one in the cards. One of the things I can say is last year I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, and that was one of my favorite books of the year. I'm currently reading the sequel, and I'm enjoying the little bit that I've gotten into it. I've also really been enjoying the Sookie Stackhouse series. For the most part, I'm pretty surprised at how well it has grown. There's definitely some like cringeworthy moments where you're like, oof, this is the 2000s like era of writing for sure. But I am really enjoying that as well. And then the second book related question is, what was my favorite book when I was a kid? So I also have a video that I will plug above. That was what books shaped me as a reader and / writer. And one of them was The Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. I will say I've been wanting to do like a rereading of my childhood favorites. So I don't exactly know how well this holds up now, but I do remember I read it several times as a kid. It was first introduced to me, I believe, in either 3rd or 4th grade. And then from there, like I continuously picked it up. And I remember like this was one of the first books, if not the first book, that I remember sobbing over. I think this would rival Bridge to Terabithia. I remember getting emotional over both of those books. But this one just always stuck out to me, and I don't know what it was, but I think it was, again, that emotional impact, because this book is about a Native American girl who they get rounded up by white colonizers, and her family is all taken and all of her people are taken, but they left her brother on the island. So she escapes to go save her brother. And there's just a lot of stuff that happens in this short little book for middle graders, and it is very sad. This was my favorite book. I had a few therapy and counseling related questions, so thank you guys for asking me those. The first one is, as a therapist, do I find it hard to follow similar advice that I give clients? And what I will say to this one is it's a tricky answer. When I first started out in my career, I would definitely say yeah. Like sometimes I would give like solid advice to clients, but like it would be one that I should follow as well, and I couldn't. The longer I am in the field, I do think I gain more self-awareness, and I encourage myself and push myself to do the things I suggest to clients. However, what I will say is not all advice or input from counseling will jive with everyone. So there are definitely times where I will like give input or feedback to a client, and it will work, or it should in theory work much better for them, but it's something that I could never do. And that's just real life. Not everyone is going to fit perfectly into a box. So I am also not going to be able to follow advice that I give a client if it doesn't work for me. So it's kind of like it depends on what it is. That's my answer for that. I lumped this next question in with therapy and counseling because it is related, and it was, how is grad school going? It's going well. So I just actually got my grades the day I'm filming this, and I got all A's. I had 1 A-, and I know that it's due to the quizzes because I ended up getting like 3 or 4 70s on my quizzes because they suck. I hate quizzes. And I got an A-, but ultimately I still got like a 3.86 GPA, so I can't complain. It was a solid semester, all things considered, for how much I felt like I was going under. And with that, I finished all like the core classes. So all of the like classwork is done for me. So next year now I get to enter my practicum and internship hours, and that's all I get to focus on. So I don't have to take any more classes. It's just practicum and internship, and I think that'll be much more manageable than all the bookwork and being at class every night like I was. And the last question, which is also writing related, but I put it in here, was, has my job inspired my writing in any way? And absolutely, 100%. As I mentioned, I wrote a contemporary, and some of that has been inspired by clients I've had and I've worked with. Similarly, I do use my psychology background. I have a master's in psychology, so I use all the information I learned in these past years in my work itself. I am always very interested in psychology, and I think it helps me create characters as well as character interactions. The first one is, what is the zodiac sign I've encountered that I don't normally get along with? Which is such a good question, and I wish I knew. I do think I get along with most people, partly because I'm good at doing it. I do this for a living, so I need to talk and work with people. But in general, I'm a very friendly and outgoing person. I might say Aquarius because of some personal reasons. I've butted heads with some Aquarians, and I'm sorry if you are an Aquarius. That's not like a jab to you. It's just in my life, I think I probably had the most complications with people who are Aquarius. So the next question is, on the day of filming, how am I doing? I'm fine overall, and I do mean that as fine. Not great, not bad, just in the middle there. And I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I have had some personal life issues, but despite all that, I do think I'm weathering it through pretty well. I am happy that I have a break from grad school, and my job has gone virtual again. So because of that, I've been able to catch up on a lot of things within work that I haven't been able to. So I do think I'm okay overall. Next question is, what is something that I tell my younger self, like my middle school or teenager self? And I think, like, to be honest, I think the thing that I would tell my younger self is just that like, your depression is going to get better. Because when I was a teenager, my depression was really bad, and there was definitely those days where I just didn't know what was going to come next, if there was anything. So I struggled with that a lot. And I just remember sometimes crying because I'm like, is this ever going to get better? And that's part of the reason why I work with kids now, is because I've been in those shoes before, and I hear that from them sometimes. And I'm like, okay, like, if I could go tell my teenage self that, that's what I would tell them, because that's what I tell my clients too. So I think, like, that would be what I would say, is that, you know, you think it's going to be the end, or like you're not going to get through it, but you are. And your depression is actually going to kind of almost dissipate completely. It's going to be much better. Next question I got was, how was I as a kid? Such as, was I the quiet kid, the loud kid, or something else? And I definitely say I would be classified as the weird kid. If my classmates were going to classify me, that would be my guess. But I would be a mix between, like, the weird kid and the hyperactive kid. I definitely had undiagnosed ADHD as a child. I remember someone telling me after, like years after the fact, that I actually had been kicked out of their home for being too hyper, that their mom was like nervous around me. But I was always doing something. I was always getting into something. I was doing something from the moment I woke up to the moment I slept. And I think that's partly why I could have been the weird kid, because I was always interested in things. So I was kind of always just marching to the own beat of my drum, no matter what. All right, this one comes with a caveat. It is, what do I think is my best quality? With the threat of that I should say nice things about myself. Bitch. Thank you for that question, Kelly. But my best quality, I guess I would just say that I am empathetic. I think that would probably be my best quality. And that's also what makes me a good counselor, because I can take a empathetic stance even if I wouldn't personally agree with someone. Next question is there anything interesting going on in my life, such as shows, plans, books, etc.? And there's probably a whole lot of nothing. I would probably link to my November recap to kind of catch up on what shows I've been watching, because some of them are still relevant to what I'm watching now. And also, eventually, I think I'm going to live stream this month on my channel and do like a small celebration as well. So like, I don't really have anything else going on. I don't know. I should have just not answered this question. Next question is, do I have any Christmas plans? And yes, I do. Due to some of my personal complications in my life, I don't exactly know what's happening with my Christmas plans. To be honest, I don't know how it's going to work. There's been a lot of upheaval this year, particularly in the last week for my mother's family. So I don't know if the Christmas plans are going to be the same. I used to always do Christmas Eve at my in-laws and then go to my dad's side of the family. And then Christmas Day, we'd see my in-laws for a little bit and then go to my mom's side of the family. And that's still technically the plan, but I'm going to even see, because my dad's family might not even do Christmas at all, like as a celebration. And like I said, my mom's family is going through some stuff right now. So we're just going to see how it goes. But I think my in-laws are solid. So at least we're going to have that. Next question is my top travel destinations. And I love it because I want to travel everywhere. So going to a top is hard. But I will definitely say I want to go to Ireland. I would also like to go to Wales and Poland. Otherwise, like other than them, I always wanted to see Egypt. I also want to go to New Zealand because of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I really want to go to Japan. Alaska has bumped up on my list due to talking to one of my friends who went there. And she had a wonderful time and just sold me on it. So Alaska is now there. And I don't know. There's just so many places. I will go anywhere. The next question I have is, what are my favorite shows or movies? And do you have time? Because the shows that I've watched and the movies I've watched, I love. So as far as movies go, Lord of the Rings. I mean, one of my favorite things of all time. I love the movies. I love the extended cuts. I watch them every year with my friend Mallory. And we're actually going to do twice this year to catch up from 2020. And we're going to be watching it for the 20th anniversary of the Fellowship of the Rings, which I believe is on the 19th of December. So if you are as old as I am, feel old with me. My favorite movie of all time, I always say, is V for Vendetta. The Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise is also on my top list. And it is one of those movies where you've either know what it is or you've never heard of it. And I remember going in with like no expectations, because I'm lukewarm about Tom Cruise, but that movie was so good. And I just remember, like, I think about it every now and then and I'm like, wow, what a movie. As far as TV shows go, currently the show that I'd never shut up about is Legion. It was 3 seasons on FX, and it was about the mutants before the X-Men officially formed. So you're following a very powerful mutant who doesn't know they're powerful and actually has mental health issues that is related to his mutation. So it's a very interesting concept. It's kind of quirky and weird and dark and scary at times, and it's just right up my alley. And my Dreamland, my Project Dreamland, has some influences from Legion. So if you haven't watched it and you like X-Men, go watch it. Aubrey Plaza's in it. The guy who played Beast in Beauty and the Beast, excellent. Jermaine Clement, love it. And there's probably a ton of other shows that I really like that I'm not going to think of right now. But I also love a lot of anime, and a lot of the anime has stuck with me. So like Death Note, Full Metal Alchemist, Sailor Moon, even though I understand Sailor Moon's not like a perfect anime, but I love it anyway. It was like my first anime I've ever watched. Chrono Crusade, Yu Yu Hakusho, Fruits Basket, and most recently My Hero Academia. I know I'm a basic bitch, but I love what I love. All right, the next two questions are from someone that I was kind of like, oh my God, these are the hardest questions anyone's ever asked me. And I told her so. So the first one is, what's something you want people to know that you are never asked about? And this was so hard. And I had like maybe possibly 3 ideas for this. And now I'm like filming and I forgot them all. The one is super obscure that I thought of. So I think I'm just going to go with that one. And it is about coffee. So I do have a cup of coffee every single morning. And I do say that I have a caffeine addiction because if I don't have that cup, I do get a massive headache and usually feel like crap. But I only have 1 cup a day normally. If I have any other beverages, it's almost exclusively water. And sometimes I will get like hot chocolate or another drink with dinner occasionally. But for the most part, I just have that 1 cup of coffee. And I feel like so many people like live on coffee that it's kind of strange. Second, I actually don't like the taste of coffee. Like if you were going to give me black coffee, I would gag. Like it's gross to me. So I need to sweeten it. Like I have to either have like fancy flavors in like the form of a latte or a cappuccino or something like that. Or I have to use creamer, which to be honest is probably super unhealthy because there's so much sugar in creamer. The next one, which is on a similar note, is what's a question that you aren't asked very often that you want to answer? And I guess maybe it would just be like, what's on my bucket list? Because I have a running bucket list. I actually started making it on a Word doc when I was in high school, and I add to it and like cross things off as it goes just to check it along. And a couple of things that I'll just share that's on my bucket list is I really want to be a movie extra and or TV show. Like if I could do the trifecta, music video, TV show, and movie, that would be great. I have already been in a music video, so that was already checked off my list. But the other 2 I really want. Not something that I like constantly look up and search, but every now and then I check backstage. And if there's something that I would be like gravitating towards, then I'll make a whole backstage account and try to be an extra in something. But that is definitely on my bucket list. And thankfully, the rest of these aren't really quite questions. But from Diane Marie, she told me that she loves and misses me. And girl, same. We will get together soon and like hang out. It has to happen. From my friend Rachel, she asked, why am I so cute? And I don't know. That's for you to decide. And then from my lovely husband, he asked if I still love him. And of course I do. With all my heart, you are the best. Thank you for supporting me. And with that, that is all the questions I have. So I hope that the questions I answered were interesting and you learned a little bit more about me and where I am in my life. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them down below and I will try to answer them in the comments. And with this out of the way, I hope you guys will enjoy the upcoming videos on my channel, which will be talking about all of my recaps and reviews of the year. So I will have like my best books, my most disappointing books, reviewing my 2021 goals, making my 2022 goals, and all of that end of the year goodness. So be on the lookout for those. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.